All right, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Harp and Guitar, People and Music. And welcome to our first official live stream podcast here on this channel. And I just want to quickly introduce myself. My name is Whiskey Stills, and I'll be your co-host here today with my partner in crime here on harp and guitar, and that would be Monk Music. Howdy, Monk. How are you?
Hi, fine. Good evening if you're in the UK. Good morning. You did good afternoon, I think. Wherever you are in the world, we're very excited about this. We've been talking about this for weeks, haven't we? To talk
Yes.
about nothing but the blues. It's amazing how a conversation drifts into your passion. Surprise, surprise. So if you are a lover of blues and you want to find out about the blues like I do, you need to pin back your lugholes, that's your ears, and listen to Whiskey because he has an authority. I'm putting you on the spot here, fella. he has a he has an authoritative, just enormous knowledge of the history, the people, the development of the music, and how it's affected rock and roll, pop music, and all kinds of stuff. So I'm just absolutely pumped that we've got such a mine of information
Well,
uh,
thank you. Thank you. That's
to
very
draw upon.
humbling.
And well, it's absolutely true, isn't it? I mean, think about the midnight oil we've burned, talking about the blues. I mean, I know, in comparison to you, I know nothing. It's been amazing. Been amazing
Well,
listening to you.
well, I've been looking forward to this as well because this partnership that you and I have developed with this channel, and subsequently, uh, a fantastic friendship has blossomed out of it
Hmm.
as well. But it's great to find a kindred spirit who shares a passion for something that I do, and your passion definitely shines through in your playing. You're a highly skilled player, and even before we started this channel together, I had subscribed to your channel, and I enjoyed listening to you play the blues and the bending, the bend heaven. I think was what I used to quite often comment on your videos. Your you seem to not only get it but feel it, and that's something that's very important that we talk about when referring to the blues. Is that
They have.
it's a deep type of music that brings up different types of deep emotions, and it's the type of music that you feel deep down, much like jazz and soul music as well.
Yeah,
So,
sorry.
so it's a pleasure for me to be in the company of a musician such as yourself, Monk.
Well, that's very kind of you. I could cite you many, many younger and better guitarists, but I do understand what you mean. Just so long as you play with passion. I believe is it Tchaikovsky, one of the major composers, said it mistakes count for little, but if you play music without passion, that's a crime. And I think that's why I'm drawn to the blues, because you can get somewhere with it at a simple level and carry on developing your entire life, or at least that's something I've found you can do, because there's always another riff, there's always another key, there's always a little nifty trick to learn, and
Hmm.
it's a constant. And you get better as you get older, which is great because your maturity tends to come through it. So you can tell, say, young BB King, can't you, when he's not doing so much um, vibrato when he's
Hmm.
younger, and his riffs are really quite basic to start. And I remember you explaining, and then as he got older, the whole thing just like, I don't know, like, oh, this will sound really pretentious, like wine just
Yes, no, you're right.
homogenized and became just so sweet, you know. So for those of you who are expecting how to do rock and roll, and we're getting no, it's about the blues, and
That's
we'll
right.
I think you'll find that we drift. We go into long monologues explaining stuff. So if you don't like that, I'd suggest this isn't your channel,
Yeah,
because
we're gonna have some fun, and we're gonna discuss
yeah,
some interesting
yeah,
topics, and we're gonna explore a little bit today, maybe of some of the familiar and maybe not so familiar names and
mm,
faces and song lyrics of the blues. And I just wanted to touch on the point that you were making about BB King, and it sort of
mm,
ties into a lot of what we hear about the blues, is that it's a primitive style of music. I would say that I would agree with that, but I would maybe use a different term than primitive. Although it is primitive in the sense that it's ancient, it's an old style of music
mm-hmm.
that can be traced back to West Africa. and other countries of origin, because blues is really a mishmash of about 5 or 6 different musical styles from different parts of the world, but put together it becomes a unique American art form of music called the blues. And the thing about it is that, yes, in that sense it's primitive because it goes way back, but I would
Mm-hmm.
say it's more of a simple type of music, in the sense that once you understand it and feel the music, if you do have that passion for it, the basic building blocks of the 12-bar blues are very easy. And within that beauty, you can add in your own, in that simplicity, you can add in your own complicated riffs and chord structures and changes, like you were saying, and sort of
Mm.
create your own individual sound. And a lot of these early guys like B.B. King, they started off with one style, and like you said, as they matured and progressed, their styles changed to reflect not only their influences, but now their own individual personality based on how they feel that music starts to
Yeah.
shine through. Because early on, B.B. King was influenced by Charlie Christian and a lot of the more jazzy type of blues guitarists, um, the early pioneers. Django as well, actually,
I was
Django
going to
Reinhardt.
say he did. Yeah, he name checked Django in a video I
Yeah.
saw once.
And T-Bone
Although,
Walker, he was heavily
mm,
influenced by T-Bone Walker as well. And yes, you're right, in B.B. King's earlier recordings, you can hear that he's much more structured, much more crisp, I guess you could say, a lot less bending and tremolo and vibrato. And then as he developed through the 60s and into the early 70s, he really came into his own
mm,
sound. And that's that famous B.B. King, what he called trilling the strings.
mm.
It wasn't so much that he would bend it and hold that bend, is that he would, what he called trill, or sort of shimmy his left hand and
Yeah,
create
it
that
pivot
beautiful bell ringing sort of effect.
that pivot round the first finger. I spent an age trying to get that, and it's you've got to be BB King. I think. I
Well,
don't know how he developed it. I think.
he probably spent an age developing it too, right? Because I
Yeah.
mean, for the first 10, 15 years, you can hear on his recordings that he didn't play like that at all. You know?
No, it's very. The early recording you played for me was very much a rectangular. That sounds a bit odd, but looking at the blues scale, I've got the guitar here. He played very much very, going through the box. Very. Whereas later it was. That's what you're talking
Yes.
about, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, the thing to
Uh,
remember about somebody like BB is that he sort of almost had 3 careers, really.
mm,
He had his early career where he was still a farmer and working on plantations and in fields as a sharecropper. And on weekends, he would head over to West Memphis, Arkansas, because he was in Memphis, Tennessee, or near Memphis, Tennessee, which was
okay.
a dry state, no alcohol permitted. So
Mm-hmm.
he would head across the Mississippi over to West Memphis, Arkansas, which was not a dry state, and you could buy alcohol. So that's where the
Ah,
juke joints and all the parties, the blues parties, were all the big blues house parties and get backs and that sort of thing. So on weekends, Friday nights and Saturday nights, and maybe even on Sundays, although he more than likely went to church on Sunday because he sang in a gospel choir when he was younger. But, after work, he would head over and he would make some real money playing for spare change in these juke joints. And then eventually, that was sort of his first career. Then eventually he was discovered and approached by Ike Turner in the late 40s.
Ike
And
Turner.
yes, and Ike Turner at that time was
Ah,
working.
right. Okay.
Ike Turner at that time was working as a subcontractor, doing talent scouting for Sam Phillips. And this is when Sam Phillips had the Memphis recording service prior to changing it to Sun Records. And he employed Ike Turner to scout out some of the local talent, the bluesmen in the area. because he knew that Ike Turner, as well as being a bluesman, had a good ear for music and had a lot of connections. So Ike approached BB and said, there's this guy named Sam Phillips over in Memphis, and he's got the studio called Memphis Recording Service, and he's looking for good original bluesmen. You got to have at least 2 songs. It's even better if you have 4 original songs. And you go in and audition for him, and you could get a record contract.
Well,
and the rest is history.
That's staggering. So this is the Ike and Tina Turner, Ike Turner.
Yes, this one in
so one in the same. It just So it just shows you how well connected BB King was, and how the whole thing ties together, because he's a linchpin and a mentor to many guitarists.
Absolutely, but his gateway was Ike Turner, because the thing to remember about Ike Turner is before he was famous for, his extramarital shenanigans with Tina Turner, he was a very accomplished and well-established musician in and around the Memphis, Tennessee area. He was the keyboard player on Jackie Brenson's hit song Rocket 88, which is commonly regarded as being, many consider that to be one of the very first rock and roll songs, because it was a blues song, but up-tempo, using 4/4 time with a backbeat, and it was very rooted in that boogie-woogie jump blues, R&B or rhythm and blues style, right?
So let me get this right.
Became rock and roll.
All right. So Rocket 88 was a song.
Yes.
Because we have a band round here called Rocket 88, and I thought, why is it called Rocket? I've never heard of that. That's incredible. You see, gents, you've got to listen to Whiskey. It's just encyclopedic. It's fantastic. I love it.
So this,
carry on.
Song Rocket 88, sung by Jackie Brenson, and Ike Turner played keyboards on that song. The piano that you hear is Ike Turner, and people forget that he was a great studio musician, and he traveled around and he played in juke joints, and he had his own band. Ike Turner's Rhythm Kings, if I'm not mistaken, is what they were called. And this is in the late 40s, by the way.
Gosh. It must have been quite old when he met Tina Turner then.
He was already in his 30s when they met and formed the Ike and Tina Turner Review. And surprisingly, they used to perform quite often with B.B. King in and around the Louisiana and Tennessee and Mississippi area in juke joints and clubs, where once in a while Ike and Tina Turner, the Ike and Tina Turner Review in the mid to late 50s, would open for B.B. King.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, so B.B. King's first career really was just playing juke joints and that sort of thing. And then his second career was he went over to the Memphis Recording Service and recorded 3 o'clock in the morning blues, and I believe Worried Blues, or no, Troubles, 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 for Sam Phillips at Memphis Recording Service. And he got a contract to record, and he recorded a bunch of songs there. And then he went over to RPM Records and signed a contract with them, and re-recorded some stuff, some of the stuff that he recorded with Sam Phillips over at RPM as well. But that was sort of his second career, and that's where you hear his really crisp, almost early, that early sort of almost primitive style of B.B. King's playing, where he doesn't do so much of the trilling, and he's very clean sounding, shall we say, right?
Yeah, I've got a question about that. Do you think that was influenced by the advent of the amp and the semi-acoustic? Because he played just a steel strung acoustic from looking at the pictures that you see on the internet. Do you think that's anything to do with it? Because I know if he's influenced by what's his name, the jazz player, not Robert Johnson, the other fella, Charlie Christian. If he's interested,
Charlie Christian,
well, Charlie Christian developed the pickup, didn't he?
Yeah.
And the electric guitar. So if he's influenced by Charlie Christian, do you reckon the technology was part and parcel of developing that trem? Because it really comes out if you set your amp correctly and take the treble down just a little bit.
That's right. And I think it was a combination of the very, very early influences on a really young BB when he was first learning to play the guitar and listening to Charlie Christian records.
Mm.
But then he got into T-Bone Walker, who was a beautiful Texas blues guitar player, fantastic. And T-Bone Walker as well was one of the very, very early first guys to play an electric guitar or play with a pickup, an electric pickup on a guitar. Charlie
Mm.
Christian, T-Bone Walker, these guys were guys that were showing up to play in juke joints with electric guitars and blowing people's minds because nobody
Yeah.
was doing this yet, right?
Well, of course, that's new technology, isn't it? It's like I suppose a
Right.
70s synthesizer.
That's right. But because T-Bone grew up, I mean, he eventually was in Texas, but as a young boy, he grew up in Louisiana. So he had a much more of a jazzy sort of feel to him as well. But T-Bone did a lot more bending because as he was learning to play guitar, he had moved to Texas. And T-Bone was influenced by Blind Lemon Jefferson, who was a generation earlier of bluesmen. And Blind
Right.
Lemon did a lot of bending and a lot of really intricate fingering up and down the fretboard. You listen to Blind Lemon stuff, and it sounds like two guys playing guitar at the same time, but it's one guy.
Gosh.
And he heavily influenced T-Bone, and T-Bone started doing a lot more bending on the electric version of the guitar. And then that, therefore, now influenced B.B. King, who started listening to T-Bone Walker records. And that's when BB started incorporating a lot more bending and then a lot more of that tremolo, vibrato, a lot more of that what he called trilling.
Mm.
And BB's also within his first career when he first started recording is he was also a DJ at WDIA in, I believe, is also in Memphis. And it was the first black-owned, black-operated radio station that played nothing but blues and rhythm and blues, jump blues and boogie woogie and all that sort of thing. And BB started off as an announcer, a DJ, doing commercials, live commercials. He would just be in the studio with his guitar and he would just make up jingles for different sponsors for the program. And then he would announce where he would be playing on Saturday nights, and he would spin a couple of records, and away he'd go.
Mm.
And that
Cool.
really helped to build his recognition in the South. You know, people started to recognize his name, and then he changed his name from Riley King to BB King, which stands for Blues
Blues
Boy King.
Boys.
Yeah, because that was his stage name, and that's what he handled himself as, was the Blues Boy BB King. Because he was a young kid when he really first started, right? So
Yeah, that's the thing. You tend to think of him as a sort of middle-aged to old guy of a rotund appearance, but in actual fact, was quite a, would imagine quite a lean young guy
oh yeah, he
for quite
was.
a while because they
Yeah,
weren't they weren't
he was a
exactly
young
well
kid.
paid, I would imagine, to start.
No,
Do
he
you fancy
was.
having shall we have a jam and play a bit?
Well, sure, if you want to play a little bit, yeah,
Yeah, just a thought. I don't know. We're just experimenting with the channel, aren't we? In the live stream.
yeah.
Feel free to comment, folks, what you want us to do. If you want to jump in and have a chat, it's fine. But it's all about the blues.
I think
And I like to do.
Riff raises a point in the chat that Ike Turner's band were the Kings of Rhythm. I think that's correct, actually. Yeah.
All right.
And yes, Junior Parker did record at Memphis Recording Service, later Sun Records, as so did James Cotton, who later was one of the harmonica players for the Muddy Waters Blues Band after Little Walter left to go on his own after his big hit Juke.
Which
And
is what you
also,
uploaded the other day.
yeah, and a great song, a great harp solo song. And actually, the Howlin' Wolf recorded for Sam Phillips before going to Chess Records. And actually, Howlin' Wolf did record a little bit in Los Angeles for Modern Records as well, which BB also did for a little bit. So yeah, a lot of these guys are all intertwined. But Sam Phillips is a real catalyst for the sort of the late 40s through the early 50s bluesmen. Sam Phillips, don't forget, was recording bluesmen for almost a decade before he started recording what later became known as rock and rollers like Elvis and Roy Orbison and Jerry Lee Lewis and all these guys. He was recording bluesmen first, like Ike Turner and B.B. King and the Howlin' Wolf and James Cotton and Junior Parker.
Yeah, these are all top all the pioneers.
Yeah, a lot of these guys
Amazing,
went on
amazing.
to join bands that became known as these huge bands, right? There's
Mm.
a definite link between
Oh, you've gone a bit funny.
Sam
Uh,
Phil Water bands linked up with Muddy. It's amazing.
Milk Riff Magos says Milk Cow Blues Boogie
I like the way
is
that,
my favorite early Elvis blues, because I guess he was a bluesman, was he? I'm
yeah.
supposing.
Who, Elvis?
I beg your pardon.
Elvis, a bluesman? Yeah, he was uh, originally when basically the exact at that time, late 40s through to the very, very early 50s, say 52, 1953, somewhere in there.
Mm-hmm.
In that time period, the exact same music, if it was recorded by African Americans, by Southern blacks, was known as rhythm and blues or blues. If it was up tempo, generally referred to as rhythm and blues, or or a slower beat, it was known as blues. But whatever, they're
Oh, right. Okay.
basically the same. Now,
Right.
if a white Southerner recorded the exact same type of song itself, it was known as hillbilly music. Later became known as rockabilly. Later became known as rock and roll.
Oh, right. Okay. So rockabilly is the transfer phase from hillbilly to rock and roll.
Yeah, basically
Ah, right.
rockabilly
Okay.
is rockabilly. Basically, to boil it down to simple, rockabilly is white version of rhythm and blues because
Right. So
the songs, at least initially when they sort of both sort of came up around the same time, being influenced from early folk music, right?
right.
What happened was a lot of times blacks and whites were working in the fields together as sharecroppers and singing a
Mm-hmm.
lot of the same songs. But unfortunately, a white person, a black person couldn't go and record the same song at the same record studios that whites could. So that's where you get the split and the categorization, and you get things started to be known as blues or rhythm and blues, and then hillbilly or eventually country music, which was actually first known as country swing before it was known as country music,
Ah, right.
because
Okay.
blacks couldn't record in the same studios. And in
That's
fact, it
terrible.
was even then it was even frowned upon for to have sort of intermixed bands where you have blacks and whites playing together in a band. And Sam Phillips kind of broke down a lot of those barriers, and he said, "I'm going to record who I want when I want, and they're going to play with who
Yeah.
they
Good lad.
want, and they're not
Absolutely.
going to come in. They're not coming in the back door or the black entrance off the alley. They're coming in the front door like everybody else because these are paid professional musicians, and I want to put them on wax. And these are talented men with God given
Yeah.
talents."
It's hard to believe. It's actually, it's almost impossible to think that that was the background in society. I find that just it's so far beyond my, you know what I mean, beyond my experience. That's
Yeah,
just I don't know.
well, that was
Uh, I don't get it. Anyway, well,
that was
that's
one of the major catalysts for a lot of the subject matter of
yeah,
early blues, especially when it was still known as basically folk music. Folk, you know, uh, white blues, black blues. That was to them singing and performing. It was all the same. They were just
mm-hmm.
singing their version of folk music.
Oh, hang
At the
on.
end of a hard
Yeah,
day, they would sit and play to get some relief. They would
Riff
play at
Mago.
barbecues and picnics.
Sorry, Riff Magos says marriage of blues and country is bluegrass. Ah, right. Okay, so that's bluegrass, is it? Elvis version of Blue Moon of Kentucky. What he and Sam? Oh, we've got to get Riff in here. I'd love to hear you two guessing about all this. So I've never really understood, Riff. What is? Well, I could ask you, Whiskey. What is bluegrass? So that's country, and is this sort of? I don't know. What is it?
Bluegrass is an offshoot of what was known, which was sort of around at the same time as blues, uh, which was known as geez, I'm sorry, I'm drawing a blank here. I did so much reading
Well,
last night to
well,
prepare
riff.
for this.
You don't need to do that. We can generate questions and find out after. So Riff Magos, Riff, is it Magos or Magos? Magos? Riff
Riff
Magos.
Magos. Yeah.
Riff Magos.
Yeah.
We need to get him in here, don't we? Because he seems to know some stuff about blues and bluegrass. See, I'm keen to learn and listen because I want to become a better blues player. And I think if you know who you're dealing with, you begin to play a bit better. But anyway, do you want to have a quick jam?
Sure. What key are you in?
Well, could do whichever. I'm easy. I mean, the bluegrass keys A minor, isn't it? Country key.
Oh, they're all over the place. It just depends, really.
Okay, well, whichever. Oh, talking of rockabilly, do you like the Stray Cats?
Sure, of course I do. Yeah, Brian Setzer's very good.
Oh, I can't play. Oh, if I could play like Brian says, oh man, I'd be
Yeah,
such a
Brian
pain in the neck.
Setzer's quite good.
Oh wow, yeah, I'm gonna study some of it. It's really difficult technique because he folds a pick under with his fingers and does the chordal stuff, and then whips out the pick and starts playing the solo stuff for the blues. And it's a hell of a technique. Oh, MH is in the house. Hi
Oh,
MH, how
hi,
you doing?
Mitch. Yeah.
Right, just quick, sharp a quick hello. Yeah, it's good to get these bluesophiles, can we call them?
Yes, sure.
Bluesophiles, bluesophilic, or whatever you call it. Yeah, Stray Cats are okay, but the Meteors or the Cramps are better. All right, okay. I've never really heard much of the Cramps. I should have done because into the punk thing. Add to that a bit
Yeah,
of blues. Presto.
Cramps
Right. Hold on.
lean, Cramps lean a little more into to the sort of the punk scene of it, but yeah, still very heavily influenced in the
Yeah,
rockabilly scene, right?
yeah.
And
Riff Magos is explaining the bluegrass Appalachia combining the Irish, Scottish, English, and folk. Right. I get it. Right. Okay.
yeah.
So,
Yeah,
right. Yeah.
bluegrass was it's more of an up tempo folk music that sort of grew out of the hill country. Yeah, the Appalachians.
All
And it
right. So,
combines, yeah, Irish jigs, Scottish tunes, fishing shanties.
I got it. Sorry. All right. So far, folks, we've had B.B. King, Charlie Christian, Blind Lemon the Blind. Yeah, that's right. Is it?
Blind Lemon Jefferson, yeah.
Blind Lemon Jefferson.
T-Bone Walker.
T-Bone Walker. Wow. It's and Ike and Tina Turner. It's incredible how this lot's connected. It really is.
Yeah, which leads, that's right. Oh, speaking of Muddy Waters and all these guys that are connected, just got to give a shout out to Mr. Robert Johnson. Today is his birthday. He was born on this day in 1911. So it seems very appropriate that we're doing our first live stream here on Harp and Guitar, People and Music. And today is Robert Johnson's birthday. So
yeah,
happy
that's
birthday,
a classic.
RJ.
Yes.
One of the greats of all time.
And one of the classic photographs of all time in the blues.
Yes.
Sitting there with his leg over. I'm just on it now. I'm just with his legs crossed, with a big old, what looks like a Gibson, but I don't think it is.
I think
And
he
his
played
hat
a
on.
Stella.
Stella. Oh, I never heard of them.
I believe he played a Stella. Yeah.
That's a point. It'd be interesting. We'll have to touch on the development of the guitar as well, because I'm just wondering when the steel strings and the bronze strings came in, because again that will affect the bending. It'll affect the trem and also the action and the style of playing.
Absolutely.
I know this acoustic I've got next to me here has got a very narrow neck with bronze round wound strings, and of course if you Charlie Christian, I guess there'd be flat wound strings or even ground wound strings. See, that's something I know a little bit about is the technology. The strings,
yeah, that I know nothing about.
Right, well, on jazzers like to move quick, so they developed a very smooth string on the E, A, and D strings. So they had a tape, and the tape wound round the string, so they were flat tape wound, flat wound. and they don't squeak when you move along the string. Ordinary guitar strings like I've got, they are round wound, but then they started sanding the strings because they're cheaper, and if you sand them, you get a sort of a flat feel, so you can sail up the string and you can get the tremolo, so you get a ground wound string. So, oh, here we go. What key are we in?
Oh, I don't know. I was just I play in an indiscriminate key. I was just playing a little "Come On In My Kitchen" by Robert Johnson. In my kitchen, gonna be raining outdoors.
Yeah, it's good stuff. Well,
It's
do you want to have a
funny.
jam then? Sorry, go on.
Sure, yeah, you go ahead and I'll join in.
Right, key of Z. Right. Okay, I'll give you a background bunch of chords. In A, I'll do just a standard blues progression, okay?
In what key are you in? Sorry, A?
Key of A.
You know, we've tried this on many occasions and it never really worked out. You know,
Ladies,
right?
gentlemen, we are going to, you're about to see an aircraft
I'm just
crash.
going to grab my harp here. 1 second.
Okay.
Have the right key.
You ready? Hang on a sec. That's a G you played.
I'm playing a A.
Oh, right. Oh, my mistake. Sorry, my bad ears. Pardon me. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4. Is it sounding right to you?
It probably sounds terrible.
No, it's playing's fine. It's just sounded like the notes, the instruments are not tuned to each other. I don't know.
Well, don't forget too. I've grabbed my. You said A, so I grabbed my A harmonica.
Yeah, I was playing an A. I was playing an A.
But
just wondering.
I'm playing draw from second position, so that's actually I'm actually playing the wrong key.
I'm just thinking I should be playing a C. Just keep playing with you.
We could play in G.
Okay, try that. 1, 2, 3, 4.
It's very hard to do that because when I start playing the harp, it drowns out your guitar playing in my headphones, so I can't. It's very
Okay.
hard to hear. Yeah, it's
Yeah, I
tough.
can hardly hear you
That's
too.
tough.
So, we'll have to review. What we'll have to do is see if we can. We'll have a think about that because otherwise we're just going to be looking like we don't know what we're doing.
It's okay though. It must be good enough because Riff's saying that he's overlaying some lead guitar in his head. So there you
All
go.
right. Okay.
But yeah, we've
I
tried
was
that
thinking.
before, haven't we? And it's,
Hmm.
in fact, we've
Yeah.
tried that with MH jamming, you, me, MH, and I
Oh
think there was something
yeah.
else in there. And it was very tough because, like I said, once I start blowing in the harp loud enough for it to play in the, to play properly, at a decent volume level, let's say like this, then what happens is I can't hear your guitar in my earbuds anymore. Just
Yeah.
because ambient sound of my harp and sound in
Hmm.
the room bouncing around and here in my room is starting to drown it
True,
out.
but it's
So
not
yeah.
bad considering you're in Canada. I'm in the UK. So.
Oh yeah, for sure. Absolutely.
So, right. Well, what I'll have to do is lay down a track and then send it to you or something, and then you play over the top of it if you've got the tackle to mix it.
Yeah. That's a great idea.
I know MH, you play the drums, don't you, kiddo?
Yeah, and he
And the
plays bass
bass.
too.
He
Yeah.
plays bass as well. And Riff, if you're offering to do some lead guitar, I'll do the rhythm. I have no ego on this at all. And that would give us a Happy Bob Day. Classic little groove. Yeah, we'll have to have a
Happy
do.
Bob Day.
That would be Happy Bob Day. Who's
Robert
Bob Day?
Johnson. Robert Johnson.
Oh, crying out loud. God help us, I'm half asleep. Yeah, so.
Going to be raining out girl.
What are you using as a bottleneck?
Just a piece of metal pipe that I cut down.
All right, okay. Well, what I'm thinking is we're getting some technical comments here. As I said, turn the mic down. Well, I don't have the facility to turn the mic down. So I'm suggesting I do have a recording machine though. So if I do a backing track, send it to you. You could record over the or I'm sure you could do that.
Yeah, just send it as an MP3.
MP3.
Yep. And then I can just copy that onto my the recording program that I use, which is Audacity, which takes MP3 files, no problem. Yeah, and it opens them right up.
Right. Well, I've got Audacity, so I could set an Audacity file up and then just put the guitar in. Although, would you be willing to do the drums, MH? Should get some people into this chat. There's a setting where you can prevent your own mic drowning out the other side. All right. Okay. Right. We'll have to have a look at that when we're off air.
Yeah, we'll have to mess around
Get me sound like I'm on TV. Actually, we don't TV once, but I'll tell you about that later.
Yeah, it's a great day. Robert Johnson's birthday, and there's a huge link that goes through about 60 years involving Robert Johnson. Of course, Robert Johnson was heavily influenced by the late great Mr. Sunhouse, one of the founding fathers of the early blues and one of the very first to record blues professionally. Edward House Jr. is his real name, Sunhouse. And when Robert Johnson was just a teenager and was actually playing harmonica before playing guitar, he used to hang around with sort of an older Sunhouse and Willie Brown. These guys were in their 20s or early 30s by then, and Robert Johnson was, like I said, a young teen, and kind of followed them around and would pester them all the time if he could play with them. And so they'd let him play his harmonica and join in on some of their sessions at juke joints and parties and stuff. But Robert always wanted to pick up the guitar. So between sets, they'd let him bang on the guitar a little bit. Apparently he was terrible. So they kept telling him, Robert, just stick to the harp playing. But he wanted to play guitar. So eventually, Sunhouse relented and taught Robert some chords and taught him how to use the slide a little bit, the very basics. And Robert went off and just practiced and practiced and practiced for about a year. Came back, sort of resurfaced. Now a little bit of an older teenager, a young man, and quite well accomplished and well versed and well practiced, and basically started blowing everybody away with his playing because he took what Sunhouse and Willie Brown had taught him, and then he went off and listened to songs on the radio because by now there was early radio and early recordings on record and on those wax cylinders called reels. And he would listen to early blues songs from Lonnie Johnson and Blind Willie Johnson, Blind Willie McTell, Lemon Jefferson. And he sort of picked up little tidbits here and there, kind of like how Bruce Lee did with martial arts, picked up all the good stuff he liked and set aside all the stuff that he didn't work for him, kind of thing. And then he
there's a very great lineage there, isn't there? It's interesting. It's quite sad now because I remember when I was learning guitar at first, you'd go and see a band and then go and ask them, could you show me a couple of bits and pieces? This is at school, of course. And you'd hang around just on the periphery, sort of try to be cool, but dying to have a go, you know. And then I remember this lad called Paul at school. He said, I'll show you a couple of chords. And it was almost an underground thing, you know. I remember the day that John Lennon was murdered. I was given a piece of paper in a French lesson, and it had B minor drawn out on it for me. I thought, oh, right, a new chord, this week's chord, you know. And it was like that. So it must, I guess we've lost that now, that sort of excitement, undergroundness, because, of course, you can go on the YouTube and you can learn it. I don't know what you think.
Well, there were guys like this guy Sunhouse. Okay, he was a pivotal figure. He influenced and actually taught firsthand a lot of guys that became blues legends. And as a result, Sunhouse's name sort of became a little more obscure unless you really know a little bit more about the blues and realize that Sunhouse was actually the second generation that was influenced by an even earlier generation. But Sunhouse also taught Muddy Waters to play before Muddy Waters was Muddy Waters. He was still going by his birth name of McKinley Morganfield and was just playing for spare change at juke joints on weekends. Muddy was still a sharecropper and a farmer at that point, living at his grandmother's shack. And he'd walk to the outskirts of town to where the juke joints were, and he would play for spare change. And he was taught by Sunhouse. So there's a line there that goes from Sunhouse through Robert Johnson, but it also goes through Muddy Waters. Then, of course, Muddy ended up becoming the bridge between acoustic and electric blues and going up to Chicago and bringing all these guys into his band, guys like Little Walter, who eventually went out on his own, and guys like James Cotton and Junior Wells that eventually went out on their own, and great guitar players like Pat Hare and Matt Guitar Murphy, and these guys would sort of hone their skills with Muddy.
So Matt Murphy was a Muddy guitar player
for a bit. Yeah, he had a small stint with the Muddy band, and then Muddy would encourage them to go out and do their own thing and to spread the blues. That Muddy was really big on spreading it, and he wanted it to catch on. He wanted to keep it alive because he could see that the new style of music, the rhythm and blues, was starting to crush blues. Mississippi blues and the more what you would call country blues or acoustic stuff.
All right, okay.
The kids were listening to rhythm and blues and jump blues and that sort of thing now. And Muddy really wanted the core fundamental blues music to spread and for people to have a wider knowledge of the music. He basically wanted to pass on what he learned from Sunhouse, right?
Right, I'm with you. Yeah, I guess you'd want to, because otherwise it'd get twisted so far out from its original, you wouldn't recognise it. And then you'd have nobody to play. So who's this? There's a kid down local pub played it. Was it Lead Belly. Who's this Lead Belly fellow? Where does he fit in all this?
Well, Lead Belly is one of the early guys that sort of sprung up just prior to blues and sort of dipped
Mm.
his toe in a lot of uh, blues songs and songs of the sort of standard blues structure. But he's again a generation earlier than bluesman. He just sort of got roped into doing a lot of blues songs because these were popular songs at the time when he sort of hit his peak. But prior to that, he was just known as a songster. He referred to himself as a musicianer, actually. And because he didn't just sing blues, he sang work songs, he sang children's songs, he sang
Oh, okay.
political songs. I mean, he was still singing political protest songs before the likes of, Woody Guthrie or any of these other guys that came along. Lead Belly was one of the first to say the N word on record in a song called Bourgeoisie Blues in the 1930s. And Lead Belly performed everywhere from prisons to Carnegie Hall and everywhere in between. And there's literally hundreds of recordings of Lead Belly.
Right.
That song, Good Night, Irene, Good Night, Good Night, Irene, that was Lead Belly. The House of the Rising Sun, that's Lead Belly. He wrote that.
Oh, he wrote that, did he?
Yeah,
Right, okay.
House of the Rising Sun is Lead Belly. Gallows Pole that Led Zeppelin did, that was Lead Belly who originally did that. Good Night, Irene, like I said. The Midnight Special, you know that song? At the Midnight Special, shine a light on me. That was originally Lead
Really?
Belly. Yeah.
Gosh, do you know ABBA did a cover of that?
Lots of people did a cover of
There's a bit of rock
Midnight
and roll
Special, Good Night,
strangeness.
Irene. Actually, the band CCR was heavily influenced by Lead Belly, and they do quite a few Lead Belly songs on their albums and live too, actually.
Yeah, Creedence Clearwater Revival, is that for those who are new to this, I think?
Yeah.
I didn't realise that CCR was Creedence Clearwater Revival till I looked up Bad Moon Rising a couple of years ago.
Right.
And I didn't realise it was a top blues band. I was thinking, hang on a minute, this is really good.
Yeah, they're good. They're what I would call Southern blues rock. Right, they're definitely got a rock influence, but and the ironic thing is they're not from the South. I think they're from like Michigan or Massachusetts or Minnesota or something like that, which is very strange. But they did a lot of their recording in Muscle Shoals, and Muscle Shoals Studios was famous for capturing that real nice swampy Southern blues and Southern rock style. You know, that Leonard Skinner type of sound, right?
Mosley Shoals recording.
Muscle Shoals, yeah.
Oh, Muscle Shoals. Muscle. MUSSEL or MUSCLE.
I believe MUSSEL, I believe.
Muscle Shoals. I'm just Googling as you're talking. Sorry, I hope you don't mind. I'm just Muscle Shoals Studio in Jackson Highway in Sheffield, Alabama.
Yeah, Alabama.
In 19. Oh, right. Okay, I'm just got a picture up. We should start. We should actually do that. Have a screen share. But anyway, Muscle Shoals Sound Studio. All right. God, you know some stuff. How? I don't know. I'm not going to ask how you know this stuff. It's unbelievable. Anyway, sorry to be a fanboy. I mean, having a fanboy moment there, folks.
Well, it's the passion, right? I find it interesting.
Yeah, sure.
I wish as a kid I found the subjects I was learning in school half as interesting as this, because I probably would have been a straight A student and been a millionaire by now with some great job using my brain. But it's just when you find something interesting and you're passionate about it, you just, I don't know, you just tend to retain that information. I mean, the same with you. When you're playing your guitar, you're so passionate about it and you love it so much that
oh, hang on, I've dropped my microphone's come out. Oh, hello, can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you.
All right, sorry, I pulled the headphone out.
You've got such a passion for it that it starts to sort of fulfill something in your life. It's the one thing that you could sort of find joy in and passion in, but it's also just very interesting.
Well,
I've got tons of books, Monk. I've read so many blues books, and I've watched so many documentaries. I've bought so many DVDs and documentaries and watched them over and over and over again. That's the thing about this music that we love so much, is that it's got such a long and deep history now. It's been around for in one form or another. I guess if you count old work songs and field hollers as early forms of proto blues, if you count that as blues, well, you're looking at music that's over 100 years old, well over 100 years old.
I can remember the first time I got anywhere close to the blues. For those who are in the UK, it was the B. It was a 3-chord trick that led me down, started that path. I mean, it wasn't a blues tune, but the B-side of a very famous Christmas song in the UK called "Merry Christmas, Everybody." Now, the B-side is called "Don't Blame Me," and the lyrics are about being in a rock band and sticking with it until you make some money. You can't actually find it on YouTube. Well, you can, but it's too fast. It's played too quick on the recording. But in the song, it's got this. And then it's got a crack at the hang on. And that sort of thing.
Yeah,
and that,
almost.
I heard that.
That almost has a hill country style to it, almost like a what's his name? R.L. Burnside kind of a, where it's like dun 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 dun, and then all of a sudden
and the singing on it, the singing on it was vile. I mean, it's absolutely vile. It goes boo, boo, boo. Ooh. So for those of you in the UK, like MH, you'll know about Slade and Noddy Holder. Well, it was a cracking tune, and then you start listening to Slade. Overall, they were playing the blues pump, but in a sort of a more. It was actually glam rock in the 70s. So as I peeled away at that, I thought, God, I really want to play like that. That's be really awesome. And I got this really rubbish guitar off my uncle for Christmas. What will be about 8. I think this is 1973, and I couldn't play it at all. And it was dying. I had to wait like 7 years before I met some of the guitarists at school. And this lad with a humpty back, he had a really bad back, and he was really quite ill with it. But he had a big old Gretsch guitar. Big old white country gentleman. It was an expensive guitar. And I remember it. Nobody believes me about this, but he had a set of 7s on it. A set of 7s. Now, I've never seen a set of 7s since before or since now. Maybe I've seen a set of 8, and because I used to play on 8s. For those who don't know, 8s are strings. They refer to the thickness of the packet as a set of 8, which is the thinnest string. Anyway, we'll go into that another session, but the technical. But I went to his house and we spent 5 solid hours from 12 o'clock, I remember, till about 5 or 6. And he was so patient. He said, no, here's the blues scale. Play this, learn that scale, bend this bit here, get the blues note. And of course, you start with the classic, don't you? He's going like this. Like that. And I'm going. And I'll never forget, I thought, how am I going to play this stuff? And he played me records like Eric Clapton and odd BB King tracks and maybe the Odd Buddy Guy. And you slowly get better. But we just didn't stop. And then we got into the counterpoint thing where he would change over, because I slowly learned how to do that, what I call the blues pump, the boogie woogie shuffle rhythm. Yeah. And then we started dabbing chords, and they were absolutely impossible fingerings, and of course you can't. Then I got the Harvey Vincent book. I don't know if anybody out there remembers the Harvey Vincent book. Harvey Vincent produced a book called Lead Guitar, surprisingly. And the first riff, I'll never forget when I could do the first riff. Oh man, it was this, and I can never forget. It was in key G, and it was. Unbelievable. and at that point, that was it. That was the drug straight in the vein. Wow,
Yeah, that was
I was
that
totally
was the
hooked after
launching
that.
pad for you, right?
Yeah, that,
Yeah.
oh man, that was it. It was no turning back then. I was totally into it then. Oh god, and
MH in the
so what
chat
you?
says he first learned 12 bar blues in E. Isn't that standard? Yeah, most, you know what, most of the early blues guys going back,
Yeah,
the guys that I call
yeah.
the founding fathers, you know, Charlie Patton and Son House, Skip James, beautiful player, by the way, a beautiful haunting voice, Skip James, Neremiah, Skip James. Uh, they all played in what they called Spanish open E tuning. Uh, and then they would just use a capo or capo or however you want to call it, you know, to change their tuning. But yeah, a lot of them played in the open E, and I
Yeah,
think that what they called Spanish flandango or something like that, because a lot of times when you would buy a guitar, and a lot of these guys, the only guitars they could afford were from the Sears Roebuck catalog, the Sears stores, right? The Sears
yeah,
and Roebuck in the 20s and 30s mail order catalog, you know, a $12 guitar or whatever they were back then. I don't know, I don't even think they were that much, maybe $3 or $4, but that was a couple of months' wages of saving up, right?
yeah.
And you'd order this guitar and it would come with a music book. And there was always a Spanish fandango song in open E tuning there, and it showed you how to tune the guitar to E, and that was one of the songs that always came in the little booklet when you bought the guitar. So all these guys could play that song, and they all played in that sort of open E tuning. It's kind of strange and funny. But then, of course, once they practiced and they would meet up with each other and trade licks and learn off of each other, which is what musicians, a lot of them today, still do, right? Is you get
Yeah,
together,
that's
jam
that.
sessions, and you know that
Yeah,
these guys would teach each other riffs and teach each other. Some of them would teach like, hey, you're playing with a slide on your finger, or you're sliding
yeah,
a bone up and down the strings. What are you doing? And they would teach each other, you know,
yeah,
these different techniques. And eventually, you know, they'd start playing songs where they would tune the guitar to whatever they were most comfortable singing in their natural voice, rather than trying to match their voice to sing, to match their guitar tune to open E all the time.
yeah. I mean, that's the thing. I remember you get this. You just think you could, you know, that's a massive step when you could do that.
Yeah.
I think that's what you're alluding to, MH, when you could do that basic blues pump, do a 12. But then I was shown to do the sort of ninth, not ninth, whatever it's called, the shuffle pattern at the A at the fifth fret, and I learned it in G. And then we did a few Slade songs. But I just wanted to do the 12-bar turnaround because you could play over the top. And when you've got two guitarists playing, one doing an odd riff or noodling with the notes, you suddenly feel like you're on top of the world. Because, yeah, let's put a band together. And that's
Yeah, for sure.
oh, you've had it there. And that's the end of your learning in school. That's it. You're done.
And I think that's why a lot of people use the term, you know, the primitive when referring to the blues, because once you do get it, like I alluded to earlier, it is, for lack of a better term, a simple form of music. But
Oh, it is. It is. But it ain't
but then you
easy.
can build on that so much more easily that way, because the root of it isn't so complicated. And like the late great Willie Dixon said, the blues are the roots, everything else is the fruits. Everything
That's
springs out of the blues. Every modern form of American music springs
yeah,
out of the blues. Jazz comes out of the blues. Uh,
yeah,
Rock and roll comes out of the blues. Soul and funk and R&B, and then eventually hip hop, all come out of the blues. Rock and roll comes out of the blues, and then out of rock and roll you get, you know, heavy metal. It's amazing how all these different forms of music sort of branched off from that one seed. You know, the roots of the blues, right?
yeah. I mean, once you get that, what's they say? E over G, E over G, E over A, E over A. Yeah, that's the boy. Yeah, but once you get that in your ears, you think, oh, I can have this. And then of course, there are girls to be impressed at that age.
Well,
I'm
for
not,
sure.
and looking at the company we're in at the moment, yes, gents, that's why I learned. Another reason I learned to play the guitar. However, it's never left me. The women did, but that's okay.
But the music stays.
The music
stays
stays.
with you. Stays
Yeah.
with you.
See,
Yeah.
I have a theory, you know, gents, that where music resides, if you're a musician, and I'm being very generous with myself there, I think that's maybe a bit overreaching for me. But anyway, where your music resides, I think that's the same place where love resides. So I've never been let down by the music, though. So
Yeah, it becomes a
sorry,
part of
girls.
you.
Yeah,
Becomes a
it
part of
does.
you.
I
Actually,
mean,
I have to touch on the girl thing here when it comes to blues. By the way, um, there were and are a massive amount of very accomplished blues players that were women in the deep, going back to the very far past, that helped to build what we now call blues. Some of the early
all right.
pioneers were women. Memphis Minnie. You know that song "When the Levee Breaks" by Led Zeppelin?
Mhm.
Memphis Minnie wrote and originally recorded that song in the early 40s, I believe. It was about the floods and the levees that broke in New Orleans. Um, Memphis Minnie was very influential to all early blues guitarists, not just men and women. She was incredible and amazing and had many hits, many hits. And she was a cracking guitar player, like amazing solos, bending. Uh, this is before B.B. King, by the way. She started playing in the 30s.
Wow.
And then you
Memphis
get
Minute.
into Memphis Minnie. And then you get into, there was tons, of course, dozens and dozens of fantastic female blues singers that just sang. They didn't play any instruments at all. But in terms of just sticking on the quick subject here of guitarists, once you get into the 40s through the 50s and even into the 60s, Sister Rosetta Tharpe, she was actually a nun. She was a Christian nun. But she sang gospel, but also sang blues, which is a bit of a sort of a no-no, and it's always been considered a bit of a no-no to play gospel and blues at the same time. One being God's music and the other being the devil's music, of course.
Yeah,
Blues considered the devil's music. But
I've got to resist.
Sister Rosetta Tharpe would bend and play all kinds of amazing solos and riffs that eventually were employed by early rock and roll guitarists in the 50s and early 60s. As she's basically the grandmother of rock and roll. So I
Wow.
would encourage anyone to, when you have a few spare moments, just go onto YouTube and just type in Sister Rosetta Tharpe, Tharpe.
Yeah,
And
she's a good-looking woman.
she was amazing. And she toured all over the United States singing blues. She put out dozens of recordings as a blues artist. She also put out dozens of recordings as a singing nun and sang religious songs and hymns and gospel recordings. But she
Gosh.
was also part of the blues package that toured Europe in the late 50s and early 60s with Muddy Waters and Memphis Slim and Sonny Boy Williamson and Buddy Guy. And she was right there with the men playing these face-melting guitar riffs that would just blow your mind. And this is in the late 40s and early 50s, mind you, that she was first started recording this stuff.
Yeah, I'm
So
just looking on Wikipedia now. That's really quite terrible. I've never even heard of her. See, that's the thing, folks. You listen to whiskey, you're going to learn a ton. I learn an absolute ton. I can listen for hours. My
well, there was
dad
a
said,
lot
Jimmy,
of
I think you played devil music. Your dad was
yeah.
wrong, MH.
See, rock and roll was known as the devil's music, but way
Yeah.
before that, the blues was known as the devil's music. And there was a couple of reasons for that. First of all, the blue note, the flattened thirds and flattened fifths that are often employed in blues, was meant to emulate the human voice based on the singing of the African American, who still retained their pentatonic scale, the African musical scale, which is slightly different than the European, do re mi fa sol la ti do, European musical scale that we all
the octave.
we all use, right? So this note was sort of thought of as being this blue note sort of brought on feelings of melancholy and would cause people to reflect and think and kind of feel blue almost. and it was known to be sort of the gateway into your soul that would open up and give opportunity for the devil to take hold of your soul and get you to start committing sinful acts. So it was known as the devil's music.
Ah, right, okay.
And also because often the subject matter of blues, going back to the early proto blues, even right up until today's modern blues, they often sang about sex and booze and good times and partying and sort of the excessive sinful ways of life, right? So that was frowned upon, of course.
So pretty much like rappers today, I guess, because
Yeah,
they're all talking about sex and drugs and rock and roll, but they've
yeah.
really got anything new to say. I get, well, no offense to the rappers, because you hear, listen to some of them, you just think,
Yeah,
how
well,
the
that's why
hell
the
do you do that?
blues was known as the devil's music, because it encouraged, quote unquote, irresponsible behavior and a party lifestyle, and the subject matter was, about gambling and women and pimps and women doing you wrong, and plus, a lot of the subject
Yeah,
matter
when
in blues songs was undercover stuff where they were singing about their woman, but really they were singing about the boss man and how bad the boss man was treating them on the plantation or on the
she
sharecropping farm, right?
right, so she done me wrong means the boss has been a pain in the bum.
Yeah, it's the double entendre that the
Ah,
woman, this,
right, okay,
I got a woman and she's so mean, she takes all my money. Well, they're talking about the woman, but they're also talking about their boss man too.
gotcha.
And
Never knew that.
one of the, I firmly believe, I have a theory, and I firmly believe that one of the earliest marketing campaigns in music history, an actual conscious effort to market a certain category of records, in this case, blues music. One of the earliest marketing campaigns ever created was this devil associated with the blues. And that's where you get legends of Robert Johnson selling his soul to the devil. And blues singers like guys like Petey Wheatstraw calling himself the devil's son-in-law, and that he was married to the devil's daughter, and he coined himself the high sheriff from hell. And you have Robert Johnson singing songs about hellhounds on my trail, and me and the devil walking side by side. And there were literally hundreds of songs through the late 20s and the 30s, right up until just before World War II, where the subject matter was the devil or evil or doing evil. Um, I firmly believe that this was a conscious marketing campaign. People were obsessed with, this sort of taboo subject of the devil and evil, right? Because
I see.
the
So they're just
South
trying to.
is the Bible Belt, right?
I'm
Everybody
with
was
you.
Baptist and everybody went to church, black and white alike, went to church every Sunday. After church, you'd have your church revivals, and you'd have a big tent revival and picnics, and it was a big part of the culture. So when something that was counterculture like evil and devil came along, well, the record executives and the marketing campaign sort of jumped on that. And that was sort of one of the very, I think, like I said, that my theory is one of the very early and very first marketing campaigns to push record sales.
Right, okay. Well, that would make sense because we've had the punk thing, we've had the Manchester, the Riff by Ghost is talking about the Stones' influence to write "Sympathy for the Devil."
Yeah, yeah. The
So
Stones
it
were
sort of it would tend
heavily
to,
influenced by blues.
yeah, that's a more as a marketing campaign, that's more plausible than all this. Ooh,
Mhm.
play it backwards and it says,
Yeah, 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 yeah,
suck the devil's toe or whatever.
yeah.
It's just ridiculous.
I mean,
Right? Yeah.
there was a lot of
Mark.
early blues musicians that would walk into a studio, and they would have two or four or eight songs ready to record,
Mhm.
and some of them might not even be blues songs. And the recording engineers and the people that had ran the studios would say, "No, no, the hot stuff right now is blues. You got any blues?" So these guys would sort of have to relent in a lot of cases and sing blues songs when they had other original songs that they had written that weren't necessarily in that vein. Or they showed up with blues songs, and the record executives would say, "Well, you got anything about the devil, or this is the hot subject right now, or anything about the flood." because that was a hot subject in the 30s, right? Or
The flood.
yeah, the big flood that happened in New Orleans when the levees broke.
Oh,
And
right. Okay.
or do you have any songs about the Mississippi boll weevil, the insect that decimated the cotton crops in the 20s and 30s? That's they almost started. These were early examples of where they started influencing the artist and having, basically putting confinements on them and saying, well, we only want to record blues songs, and it's got to be of the subject matter because that's what everybody wants to hear right now.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. But originally, when the blues first started, as like I said, as a sort of a folk music, through the 20s and 30s, when it was sort of began to uh, sort of have its formal structure as a music in its own right. The subject matter was basically current events. This is how African Americans spread the word about different current events that were going on, like floods and you know problems with crops or tornadoes or bridges being washed away, because a lot of them couldn't read, so they couldn't read the stuff in the newspaper. So how they got their information was through word of mouth, through music, or buying early records and playing them on their phonographs. And then somebody in Alabama could find out what was going on in Texas through a Texas blues song.
Really? So it was a form of newscasting?
Almost, yeah, in a certain sense,
God.
sure. But don't
Yeah.
forget it; they weren't pressing millions and millions of records back then. A lot of records would be 100,000. Like if you printed 100,000 copies of one record, that was a lot. I mean,
Yes.
that was a smash hit in the South, a smash
Wow.
hit in the South. So a lot of times they were printing 30,000 or 10,000, or they would print 5,000, and these 5,000 records would sell out, so they'd print out another 5,000. So it wasn't taking them long. They could record a song. A bluesman could walk into a studio in the South, whether it was a brick and mortar studio, like Sam Phillips in the late 40s at Memphis Recording Service, or if they went to Jackson, Mississippi, and recorded with H.C. Spear in his furniture store, where he had a recording studio in the back, and where Charlie Patton first made his recordings, among many other famous first-generation bluesmen. But they could go in on a Friday night, record two songs, because remember, they had to be at least two songs, one song per side. Each record only had one song on each side.
Right.
They could record that song on a Friday night, and by Monday evening, or maybe Tuesday, Wednesday at the latest, their record was pressed, labeled, and shipped to the furniture stores for the public to buy. Because back
To
then,
the
that's where
furniture store. Oh, that's where you bought your record player, so I guess that's where you bought the records.
yeah, in the 30s, you bought your
Yeah.
phonographs at furniture stores because furniture companies made the phonograph records.
Yes, of course.
And so, of course, the same store where you bought your phonograph record, or phonograph player, you would buy your records. So a lot of times these guys would record a blues song on one weekend, and by the following weekend, they got paid, and their song was being heard by people in the area they lived. So now that their notoriety starts getting built up, and now they can go to a juke joint and perform the live version of that record that was released earlier that week. And people could come up and request that song, give you a dime or a nickel, and say, hey, can you play that song on your new record, Mr. Robert Johnson, or whatever.
Right. So that's actually very much what we have now, isn't it? Bands will put the record on on YouTube, and now people go to the gig, so we're back to square one.
Yeah, in a sense. And that's
Sort of, in a
because
sense. I mean, obviously,
it's
technology.
meeting the demand, right? Yeah, because it's
Yeah.
meeting demand. People want to hear the latest and the greatest as soon as
Mm.
possible. And people have always been like that when it comes to entertainment, things that they do in their spare time, things of their own choosing, whether it's music, listening to music, playing music, watching old moving pictures back then, or going to the theater, whatever the case may be, live theater.
Mm.
And yeah, it was, and Riff in the chat is also saying that they were singing songs about mojo hands and stuff. Yeah, that's sort of the second marketing campaign after this whole devil and evil thing in the 30s.
What are
In the
mojo hands? Sorry,
Yeah,
pardon
in
me.
the 40s and 50s, you had guys like Muddy Waters and others singing about mojos and mojo hands, and that alludes to voodoo practicing,
Mm,
the ancient uh, religion, and it is a religion of voodoo,
voodoo.
and
Mm.
voodoo is a sort of a mix of Caribbean and African religions mixed with traditional Christian Roman Catholic
Right.
religion, and eventually evolved into voodoo, which is practiced primarily in Louisiana, but
Mm.
in other areas of the South as well. And
Yes.
the religion itself was known as voodoo, but the incantations and the spells, like the voodoo dolls where you'd stick pins in them and that sort of thing,
Yeah.
was known as hoodoo. And a mojo hand is basically, well, what a mojo is a mojo is a good luck
Little
charm.
bag. All
Yeah,
right.
it's usually a little bag
Little bag. You said. Yeah, I remember.
known as a nation sack, a little
Mm.
small bag that was worn around your neck on a string or something, or held in your pocket. And depending what was in the bag and what sort of fabric the bag was made out of, what color and so forth, would bring you good luck for different things, like for money or love
All
or
right.
a
Okay.
career or whatever the case may be. So it was a lucky charm. So a mojo hand, basically mojo sort of began to mean not so much the bag or the good luck charm itself, but your mojo or your charm or your virility or these sorts of different
Yeah.
meanings to it.
Sexual
So
connotation.
yeah, so your mojo hand was this mojo charm giving you a hand up or giving you a leg up or giving you an
Right.
advantage over everyone else to become the best guitar player because you got a mojo from the voodoo priestess to help you play guitar better. And
All right.
this
Okay.
really came out in the 40s and 50s. And that's where you have Junior Wells singing songs like Hoodoo Man and Muddy Waters singing, I went to Louisiana and got me a mojo hand. And they sing
Right.
about things like, I got a black cat bone, which is a bone from a black cat. Black cat crosses your path, it's bad luck. So if you can catch that cat and skin it and get a black cat bone and carry that cat bone around with you, then it cancels out the bad luck that the cat gave you when it crossed its path. All of
Now
these sorts of things.
that's strange because over here in the UK, a black cat crosses your path. It's good luck. Isn't that strange?
Yeah, in the South, well,
Yeah.
over here, and especially in the Southern United States, it's considered bad luck.
All right.
But
Funny.
that's based on African traditions, though, so it's a completely different set of beliefs.
Yeah. Fair enough. So,
Yeah,
so is juju something to do with this?
juju is just another. It's a Creole or Cajun word for hoodoo, voodoo,
All
gris
right. So
gris.
it's the same. Right. I'm with you.
Yeah,
Same sort of
juju
thing then.
is sort of again like a voodoo power or your voodoo
Right.
prowess or your good luck is your juju, also known as gris gris, gris, gris gris, which is French for gray.
Grey.
Gris,
Yeah.
gris is gray. Yeah,
Yeah. Grey. Okay.
yeah,
All right.
yeah, and
Gosh, we've
that's
covered.
sort of the that was a big marketing campaign through the 50s and early 60s. A lot of bluesmen, even if they weren't from that part of the South, were singing about mojos and voodoo, and even if it was just vague references. Robert
Right.
Johnson makes reference to a nation sack. He stole a nickel out of her nation sack. I had a woman and she ain't coming back. I stole the last nickel out of her nation sack. And that was, she had a nation sack or a mojo where she kept a nickel in it, and it was supposed to bring her good luck to get money, so she could come into better financial situation. But he was in such dire straits for money that in her sleep he stole the nickel out of her nation sack, and she got mad and left him.
All right. Well, we've covered some ground here from BB King.
I think we should invite Riff and MH
Yeah.
in as well into
Let's
the
get him
chat.
in. Yeah, let's
I'm
get him
thinking
in.
I think we're pretty safe just to post the link for the hangout right in the chat.
I think so.
I don't think we're going to get any trolls or any weirdos coming into
Well,
a blues chat.
am I set up as a mod?
You should be. You should automatically be. If you type something in the chat, you should have a crown.
I'm in Monk Music. It's not harp and guitar. Well, you've put that in. You've got the crown. I think that's you. I'm as Monk Music, but if you could make me a mod.
Oh, you are not. Yeah, okay. Let me do that.
No, I'm not. That's weird. I thought it would have been default, considering it's a linked channel. Anyway,
yeah, there we
matter.
are. All taken care of. Yeah, this is
there we are.
This is the inaugural run, fellas, for us here at Harp and Guitar, People in Music. It's our very first live stream here, just having a wonderful blues chat. And we were trying to set it up so that our avatars and our names would appear as Whiskey Stills and as Monk Music, but neither of us are very technically savvy when it comes to this stuff, and we've had problems on both ends when we've been in private chats where the link has been dropped or the call has been dropped. So we thought rather than make it complicated, we would just keep it simple and easy peasy. I see we have Riffin already. Hey, Riff.
Hey, guys.
Hi.
How are you?
Good. Enjoying my final day off.
Yes, that's right. And then you're back at it tomorrow.
Yeah, I've already got my my Strat here tuned, and I've been noodling around while listening to you guys.
Oh, that's great.
Cool. All right, go give us a riff.
I don't have it plugged in. It's too early in the morning.
Oh, right, fair enough, fair enough.
MH is in with us as well. Hey, MH, how are you?
Hey.
Where is he? Oh, hi, MH.
Hey, MH.
Oh, he's setting things up. Okay, great.
Right, it's got it. His mic's off.
Okay.
Mic's off.
Yeah, I don't know if my microphone's working now. I just wondered, is it okay?
Yep.
There we go.
Yeah,
yep.
fine.
Cool.
Yeah, we hear you. Great.
Yeah, cool, man. I'll just
welcome.
mute
Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, good to see
you
guys.
Thanks for having me, man.
Yeah, I really appreciate it.
Cool.
This is great. It's great to, well, you know, Monk and I are very, very well aware that you guys share a deep passion for the blues as well, just from the chats that all of us have had. So it's great to have guys that have a similar passion for the music.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Blame it on Elmore James for me.
Yes, I've got on Harp and Guitar Blues Jukebox. I've got some Elmore James stuff coming up in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah,
the Sky's Crying and Standing at the Crossroads.
What I'm doing is,
right,
are you guys going to have a little jam tonight or not? Because I could, but it would mean sort of moving some cables around. So probably
well, we've not got that going well enough yet. I don't think we'll build into that.
Okay. We're just kind of messing around, and
we'll get into that at some point. But it just a thought. Thinking about our other commonality, I know there used to be a thing called. Well, I don't want to go into too much detail, but what brought you to the blues? What brought you to the blues?
Me.
Yeah, there you go.
Whosoever. I think that's a good question. You know?
Yes.
Okay, who's this question aimed at me? Is it?
Both of you. We just find out.
You guys go, and then Monk and I will tell ours.
Oh, sorry, mate. I talked over you then. I didn't mean to do that. Sorry.
No, I interrupted you. I'm sorry. I was just saying you guys tell your story, and then Monk and I will tell our stories of how we came upon the blues. I think this is a fascinating exercise. Good idea, Monk. No, please, MH, go for it.
Yeah, I just found some scratchy old record and thought it was from a junk shop, or I can't even remember how I got it. It was just some old scratchy old record. I put on, thought, I like this kind of stuff, and it was real. I can't even remember what it was. Whiskey, it's that long ago. I've lost half my collection. You know how it is when you're moving from apartment, you kind of lose your stuff. And,
absolutely,
yeah, security's low, and there's usually you know how it goes.
Yeah.
And so I lost a lot of my old stuff. But yeah, it's just a scratchy old record. And I thought, this is groovy. And then I sought out to learn the blues. So I got a chord book when I was about 15 or 14 or something like that. Learned E, A, G, you know, the usual.
Right.
Yeah.
Learned where the octaves are, and get a bit of harmonics going on. And then, this is groovy. And then you kind of, if you've got a musical ear, you kind of just know where you're going anyway by how it sounds like. So then I kind of ditched the book and then start using my ear more. So it should be the other way around, really. People use their ear, then they go to a book. I completely did it backwards, which is a bit weird, I suppose.
Well,
If
all
that made
roads
any
lead to
sense.
Rome. Yeah, it makes absolute sense.
Yes.
How about you, Riff?
All right. For me, it was sort of an interesting little meandering journey to the blues, I suppose. There were two things. I was a huge Elvis fan from the moment I could actually talk,
Mm-hmm.
and that kind of led me to his early Sun Records stuff and a
Yeah.
lot of that wonderful rockabilly blues stuff that he did with Sam Phillips. And that
Yes.
kind of made me want to, investigate more of this wonderful musical genre called the blues. And on the flip side of that, I had my brother, when he was a teenager, actually brought the Elmore James CD home when he first bought his CD player back in '85.
Right.
And I just found the slide guitar that Elmore tended to favour absolutely incredible. So that kind of those two different elements working at the same time kind of brought it all together for me, I think.
Yeah. Well, Elmore James is a direct disciple of Robert Johnson as well. Well,
Yeah.
sorry, indirect. Elmore James learned through Robert Lockwood Jr., who was Robert Johnson's stepson.
Right.
And Robert Johnson taught Robert Lockwood Jr. how to play, and then Robert Lockwood Jr. in turn taught Elmore James how to play.
So I suppose,
And-
like for me also, the question might arise, so why not just listen to the happy pop music of the 80s at the time? Well, I was experiencing quite a bit of racism back then going to school, and that sort of angst and, anger and frustration kind of led naturally to loving the blues, I suppose.
Yeah, yeah. Because you can relate to it, because as we alluded to earlier, a lot of the subject matter was that of being alienated or being disenfranchised from the rest of society, from your country, really,
Right.
you know,
Yep.
and not even being viewed as a citizen within the own country that you live or you're trying to eke out a living in, right?
Yep.
It's interesting that you say that whole Elmore James thing and the slide, and again going back to Robert Johnson and the comment just before you hopped in, the last comment you typed in the chat about the idea of going to the crossroads and making a deal with the devil and selling your soul for the amazing ability to play guitar. And yeah, that it's funny though that legend arose primarily out of that Crossroads Blues song that Robert Johnson recorded, but he actually doesn't even make mention of his soul or the devil or making a deal in that song at all.
Right. Yep.
That legend just comes out of folklore of Legba, which again sort of ties back into voodoo and hoodoo. And the early superstitions and early African-influenced religions.
Yeah.
But that story itself is actually misplaced. It's attributed to Robert Johnson when it should actually be attributed to Tommy Johnson, who's a generation earlier than Robert Johnson, who did a lot of his stuff in the 20s and early 30s, whereas Robert was more in the mid to late 30s. But
yeah, you're right. I think
Tommy Johnson.
Sorry, Biscuit, I shouldn't cut across you.
No, please go ahead.
I think my connection keeps dropping, and then I speak, and then you come back, and I feel rude because I've just spoken over you. Sorry about that.
No, that's fine. Please go ahead.
I can't remember what we were saying. Oh yeah, Led Zeppelin and these kind of people, they're quite famously ripped off the classic old bluesers. And they've just openly stolen from them and claimed credit for it, which I think is a bit rude, really.
Well, there were a few that did, and Led Zeppelin did get sued by the Willie Dixon Foundation, and they had to pay, I think it was $1 million was their settlement for, I can't even remember what song it was, but it was clearly word for word a Willie Dixon song. But I think that's kind of a little bit of an unfair accusation, because a lot of these bluesmen borrowed lyrics or re-recorded each other's songs anyways, without any repercussions whatsoever. Just getting back to Elmore James. I mean, his first hit was Crossroads Blues. I mean, and he sang it word for word of how Robert sang it. And nobody accused him of stealing. And, I don't know if it's just a cultural thing or if it's a skin color thing, but There are many white bluesmen that started off playing the blues at the exact same time as African American bluesmen. As I said, many were working side by side as sharecroppers, working in the fields together on the pea farms and the cotton plantations or in the sugarcane fields. And many were just as poor as one another. The only thing is that the whites were not viewed the same as blacks, in the sense that whites were still considered human, I guess, which is sad to say. Whereas blacks, by the general population, weren't considered. They were, human beings. They were considered subhuman, right? Or
they were property. They were just named things such as property, like a truck or a crane or something.
But that legend should be attributed to Tommy Johnson, because he talked about that in the 1930s, and actually after Tommy Johnson died, his younger brother.
Sorry, mate, it's my bandwidth that is whiskey.
No, that's fine. I was just going to say that after Tommy Johnson died, his younger brother, Liddell Johnson, right up until the 1960s, had talked about that Tommy Johnson went to a graveyard at midnight and played his guitar, and then Legba, or a dark shadowy figure, supposedly the devil, came, took his guitar from him, tuned it, and gave it back to him. And when Tommy started playing, he suddenly had the incredible supernatural ability to play the guitar. And Tommy Johnson is accredited with inventing and the first to play the walking bass line, where you play the bass strings and accompany yourself on the higher note strings at the same time. He was the first to actually do that, to play a walking bass and accompany himself all on one guitar.
I went down to the crossroads.
But yeah, Robert Johnson never mentions the devil in that song. He does say, sun going down, dark going to catch me here, and please save poor Bob, I feel like I'm sinking down. He does say stuff like that, but he never actually references the devil or a deal or anything like that. But again, that's part of that whole early marketing campaign, I firmly believe.
Then the Stones got into it as well with their sympathy for the devil.
Yeah.
Yeah, you mentioned that before. I think you mentioned it before.
Yeah.
So after all that fuss and all the social upheaval because of a marketing campaign, how fantastic! And of course, the simplest.
Were nothing at their time. It's like any great artist. Their fame comes after their death. That's their great legacy. And if they knew they had such a great legacy, they would be so pleased at the time when they were living. They'd be more pleased than they were already pleased for having their talent they already had. Because they know they'd be like, they're sort of alongside Jesus and all these characters. I'm not saying they're that great, but they're up there with the classics of all time historical figures. They've earned a real placement in history.
You're right. A lot of them didn't. They didn't live long enough to realize their own fame or see their own fame. You're right. Especially the first 2 or 3 generations. The Willie Browns and the Blind Lemon Jefferson lived long enough and had so many hits, and he put out over 100 records, so he's a bit of an exception. But guys like Robert Johnson really didn't. He was almost forgotten if it wasn't for Eric Clapton. Really, Robert Johnson would have almost been completely forgotten, except for among a handful of a few dozen of really serious record collectors around the world. By guys like Bob Coaster and these guys that were collecting old 78s, since the 50s, and there was only a handful of copies known to exist, and these guys had them, and then they started turning them over to record companies so that they could be remastered. And if it wasn't for that,
one of the most interesting times for me, though, for the blues was actually the 60s, the resurrection of the rock and roll kind of blues, with Zeppelin and all them. And so obviously you got Jack Bruce and all them, got Cream and you got Hendrix and they all knew each other. That's the greatest thing about it all. All these cats hang out with each other. They're all friends.
Well, even prior to that, the first blues explosion, really prior to that, was guys like Alexis Corner and when guys were playing skiffle, actually in England. That was skiffle was actually. Sorry.
Yeah, that was about 59, 60, if I remember.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
whole skiffle scene.
When
yeah.
when American
Lonnie
rock,
Donegan and all that.
American rock
So
and
they're
roll
making,
was huge. Then
making bass guitars out of broom
yeah,
handles and mop buckets and stuff like that. Weren't
Yeah.
they playing
soap
washboards?
boxes.
Yeah, and basically they were just emulating old jug bands from the 20s and 30s in Memphis, right?
Yeah.
Going
Yeah,
back to
it
the
makes a
early
noise,
times
play it.
of the Mississippi Sheiks in the 20s and 30s.
Yeah, even if it means rattling a spoon on a beer bottle,
Yes.
you do it.
Yeah, absolutely. And bands, like I said, like the Mississippi Sheiks, they recorded professional recordings, but they were basically an ensemble, a washboard band or jug band. They blew into jugs and played washboards, but they also played guitar and violin and accordion and that sort of thing. And
See,
they were just
washboard.
There's another band.
There's a thing you don't. Sorry, go on.
Yeah, go on with yeah,
Go on,
excuse
Mike.
me, my connection keeps breaking up, so I think it's a free time. So I'm about to say something, then someone's already speaking because my bandwidth's dropped. So I appear rude. I don't mean to be doing that.
No, it's fine. It's going to happen. We've also got a lag in the system anyway, so we've just got to be careful.
Yeah, it happens all the time. Don't worry about
it.
Yeah.
The washboard. We used to have a guy in this country called Derek. Do you remember Derek Guile at MH? Hello. Well, we used to have a guy called Derek Guile anyway, and he played the washboard. He was an actor.
Five guys, and you could band.
Yeah, he very often turned up on TV with his washboard, and so I guess in some small way we're keeping the idea of the blues alive. It's interesting.
Sure, yeah.
We're on top of that lineage, but I do feel connected to it. I can't help it, especially when you start to put your guitar. What was it? That was weird. What's his name? I had an album called Joe's Garage. Frank Zappa. He's describing the vile. Yeah, the vile stink of a too loud guitar is my idea of a good time. I can't remember I'm gonna have to Google it now. There's some great quote. Hang on a minute. Zappa on guitar. Zappa. Quote.
So he was ahead of his time, and he knew that the jig was upright a long time ago. He could see straight through the nonsense, and he was just telling it the way anyone knew what he was on about. A few cool cats knew where he was coming from, but hardly anyone understood him. Only
here it is.
Get to realise that he,
I found. Sorry,
he was onto the whole fake news business, wasn't he?
Yep.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, he was an aware guy, a red pill guy.
Yeah. I found the quote here. It says, Frank Zappa, the disgusting stink of a too loud electric guitar. Now that's my idea of a good time. Yeah, that's
there you go.
That's pretty much it for me.
Just wait till Jimi Hendrix arrives.
Yeah. Oh boy, yeah.
Oh, I'll do you one better than Jimi Hendrix, and I'm notorious for this. Whenever anybody throws out the name Jimi Hendrix, I'll say, I see you, Jimi Hendrix, and I'll raise you a Buddy Guy.
Yeah, great.
Oh yeah. Oh man. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
My favorite.
Buddy Guy beats Jimi Hendrix hands down. I've seen Buddy Guy in concert 3 times, and I've seen him play. I've seen him play Jimi Hendrix version of Voodoo Child, but Buddy Guy plays it with one hand.
Yeah,
plays it with one hand. My friend that was with me at the time in the concert leaned over to me at one point. He says, "Is this motherfucker playing this song with one hand?" And I said, "Yes, it's Buddy Guy, man."
That's fucking.
That's cool, man.
I'll tell you, Rory Gallagher, he's a corker.
Mm-hmm.
I was a late comer to Rory Gallagher. What a guitar player! And the other guy, oh, I forgot. Hang on, it'll come to me.
I'll tell you who's a good one, monk music. Steve Hillage he used to play with Gong, and then he became solo. He's one of the most underrated guitar players in the world.
And that blonde fellow with the really thin arms, what do you call him? Oh God,
Johnny Winter.
Albino. Johnny Winter, really fast. Yeah, cracking guitar player.
Yeah, he's widely known as the fastest fingers in the blues. Johnny Winter. an exceptional Texas bluesman. Exceptional.
And Matey Boy with the hat and the
Stevie Ray
Stevie
Vaughan.
Ray Vaughan. Oh yeah.
Another great
Oh,
Texas
yeah.
bluesman. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
absolutely. I mean,
And then there's another Muddy Waters connection there. Johnny Winter and Muddy Waters were really good, dear friends, personal friends.
Right.
And
all right. Okay.
Johnny Winter performed. Well, he opened for Muddy quite often when Muddy would tour, and he did some. He was a guest artist on quite a few Muddy albums, playing backup slide guitar. And then he also produced a couple of Muddy's later albums prior to Muddy passing away. Johnny Winter was the producer on, I think, 3 or 4 Muddy Waters albums.
Wow.
Very dear friends, very close friends. And after Muddy died, Johnny Winter started touring with James Cotton, who at one point was Muddy's harmonica player, of course. And they toured as, Johnny Winter and James Cotton. And I saw them probably 6 or 7 years ago at a community center in the big city close to me here in Calgary. And it was amazing. There was maybe 500 people in there. And there's Johnny Winter and James Cotton. Absolutely amazing.
Wow. We've got quite a blues band over here. I don't know if you've come across them, mate. The Hamsters. That's a very good blues band. They can knock it. It's only a 3-piece, but Slim is a guitarist, and I've seen them a couple of times. They're absolutely stunning. They do 3 sets. They do Hendrix, they do their own, and they do ZZ Top, and also who's the other one they do? ZZ Top, Jimi Hendrix, and I can't remember. But they're an amazing blues band. Very, very tight.
I like ZZ Top.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
good Texas sound.
The guy is a guitarist, Slim. He sprays WD-40 into the air, and then pushes his guitar neck through it, and then plays, and it keeps his fingers going fast. So the whole gig stinks of WD-40 if you're at the front. And we were right at the front, don't worry about it, glued to watching this guy play amazing blues. If you Google them, the Hamsters, they play all over Europe. They're quite a well-known blues band.
What if he develops liver cancer in the next 10 years as a result of that, though? I don't think you should be putting penetrating oil on the largest organ of your body. It's not a good idea.
Well, that's what they did. But
yikes. Yeah.
Now you've scared me to death.
Yeah, I mean, I find that just sweat works just as well.
Yeah, well, that's what they did. If you can see plenty of videos of them doing it, actually, if you go on YouTube.
I wonder if some of that was showmanship too, though.
Yes, of course.
I think so, yeah.
Some of it, but some of it was probably practical application too.
I'd rather just have a rag with vegetable oil on it.
There you go. Yeah. It's amazing how regional styles of blues eventually turned into global regional styles. So you have the blues, and it sort of cropped up in the Delta, and then it made its way eastward and westward, and then northward, developed into hill country blues and Piedmont style blues and Georgia blues, Texas blues, and then Chicago blues. But then it went global. So you get British blues, and you get French blues, and you get Spanish blues, and Canadian blues. And there was tons of great bluesmen that came out of England. Just getting back to what MH was talking about, the 60s.
John Mayall.
John Mayall, absolutely.
Oh, yeah, Blues Breakers, yeah.
John Mayall.
Yeah,
and even in, British, but UK in general, too. Like in Ireland, right? You have Van Morrison. Van Morrison is an excellent bluesman. His early stuff.
The thing that put me off Van Morrison is that he sung a particular song. I can't remember the title of it, but basically it's about a schoolgirl or something. I thought, no, sorry. When anyone starts going down that road, I think, I just don't like him as a character, and I'll just lose all interest in him.
Yeah. Well, that's probably touching on. That's probably touching on an original blues standard or an old classic blues standard.
16 kind of thing. I still don't go for that.
Time.
I've never done the Sweet 16 thing. I think anyone now because they're a fucking filthy bastard.
I'm even referring to even older than Sweet 16. There's a song called "Good Morning, Little Schoolgirl."
Yeah. Yikes.
Yes.
That
yes.
Muddy recorded
it.
Buddy Guy also recorded it, and but it goes back to Sonny Boy Williamson #1. There was 2 Sonny Boy Williams.
Yeah, but the thing is, So you see, if I was in a band and a musician wanted to play that shit, I'd say you better quit that shit right now. We're gonna fall out with each other.
Yeah, of course. But it's, it was different times, right? This was, you have to remember, this was the 1930s when Sonny Boy #1 first recorded that. It was in the 30s. And there was two Sonny Boys. There was Sonny Boy Williamson #1, John Lee Williamson. And then Sonny Boy Williamson #2, Alec Rice Miller, who actually #2 is the avatar that you see when
and Sonny Boy Jim Slim.
Well, then that's
famous
me.
whiskey.
Yeah, Sonny
exactly.
Jim Slim.
Exactly. The #1.
The first Sonny Boy Williamson, John Lee Williamson, started in the South, and he moved up to Chicago in the 30s and 40s and did a lot of recordings. And he first recorded "Good Morning Little Schoolgirl," and he talks about that he wished he was a schoolboy too, so that he could get together with this pretty young girl, because she was the prettiest young thing that in town. Yeah. So he didn't want to go after her as a man, so he was basically wishing upon a star kind of thing, that he wished he was a young schoolboy as well, the same age as her, so that she could be his girlfriend. And then there was Sonny Boy Williamson #2 that started off by just copying Sonny Boy #1, but he stayed in the South, and he toured through the South on what's became known as the Chitlin Circuit. He stayed in, Mississippi and Arkansas and Tennessee and Florida and Texas, and toured around in the South as Sonny Boy Williamson #2. And some say played Sonny Boy #1 songs better than Sonny Boy did.
Yeah.
And he sort of was billed as Sonny Boy #2 and as Alec Rice Miller, both, depending where he played. But then once Sonny Boy #1 was shot in Chicago in an alley behind a blues club after his gig, Sonny Boy #2 became known as just the only Sonny Boy. But for a while, there was two of them playing at the same time, both known as Sonny Boy, recording.
I wonder if the other Sonny Boy was suspect #1.
Who knows? Who knows?
Yeah, Sonny Boy 6-shooter.
Yeah, this town's only big enough for one Sonny Boy.
Yeah.
And I ain't leaving.
Well, I think that's why Rice Miller stayed in the South, while the original Sonny Boy #1, John Lee Williamson, mostly stayed in the North once his career was established. But actually, the first Sonny Boy started out playing with Big Joe Williams in the 30s. And they had a lot of really big hits together in the 30s, Big Joe Williams and Sonny Boy Williamson. And then they went their own ways, and Sonny Boy went to Chicago, and Big Joe Williams stayed in Mississippi.
Now, talking of Chitlins, by the way,
yeah,
there's quite a well-known record called Chitlins Con Carne by Kenny Burrell, was it?
Yes. Well, a lot of people have done it. Junior Wells did a version of it also. Yeah.
Now, was it Kenny Burrell who was the guitarist? Because he played, I think it was Kenny Burrell. Hang on a minute. Was it Kenny Burrell? Hang on a second. Kenny Burrell. Kenny Burrell, I'm sure it was Kenny Burrell. Yes, jazz guitarist. But he did the guitar playing on Organ Grinder Swing, which is a jazzy blues number, and it's a cracking guitar solo.
I think he was influenced by Django.
Trying to get on it. Yeah, but the solo on that's a heck of a challenge. It's one of the ones the solo you want to play, but you never get around to. Or it's a hellishly difficult. Yeah, it's still nowhere close to it, and if you ever listen to it, but the great thing with it is it's a sort of version of the 1-4-5 chord sequence, but it's all steep, slap bang in the blues scale, or at least the pentatonic scale, and so he must have some connection with these guys because it's bang on blues.
You want to hear a lot of playing in that style. I would recommend Lonnie Johnson, Lonnie, Lonnie Johnson. His birth name is Alonzo Johnson, and
All
he
right.
played with everybody from Charlie Christian and Django, and he also played with Jimmy Rogers, the blue yodel Jimmy Rogers, the white blues singer, the singing brakeman he was known as. He sang a lot of train songs and that sort of thing.
All right.
And Lonnie Johnson also played with Louis Armstrong and Duke Ellington as a guitarist. And he grew up in New Orleans, so he has that very jazzy tinge, but very deeply rooted in blues. And he played a beautiful style, much like what you were playing there. Just
All right.
absolutely, and a beautiful singing voice too. One of those honey-soaked, cool and calm, beautiful voices. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So yeah,
Well,
Lonnie
like I said,
Johnson. He recorded literally over 200 recordings through the 30s and 40s.
right. Because this fella cite, I'm just on Wikipedia now, cites T-Bone Walker and Muddy Waters as influences.
There you go.
From Charlie Christian again. It's amazing how they're all connected, isn't it? Django Reinhardt, of course. He always crops up. Incredible.
Well, whenever anybody makes mention of either Charlie Christian or T-Bone, it's usually they go hand in hand. One goes with the other. And again, it's because those were two of the very early guys that were experimenting with electric guitars. And they played in a similar style, that sort of jazzy, jazz-influenced tinges of blues, you know. Just that, like I said, T-Bone ended up moving to Texas, so he started playing more of the Texas style, a little bit more of a hard driving style, but still mixed with a lot of those jazzy improvisational flourishes in his fretwork. Whereas Charlie Christian stayed very much in the jazz realm.
I think that people who are into jazz too much have got dysfunctional minds and they're not rational people. I've actually come to that conclusion quite a while ago.
They're a bit.
It's music for the insane. It's not even music. It's just insanity. It's just a jumble of assorted noise in semi-sequence of some kind of incoherent jumble.
Well, when you get into the post-hard bop scene, like when you get into bop jazz, like you're getting into the 50s with John Coltrane and, you know, Miles Davis and then Dizzy Gillespie, that sort of whole bop era. That was great because they were doing improvs, but it wasn't crazy stuff. But you get into the post-hard
the
bop
Blue Note
stuff,
jazz label, stuff like that. They're just going a bit too far. It's some
when it start
way
getting
out there, man.
really,
when it gets extreme. Yeah, I mean, I like Oscar Peterson stuff. If you listen to that, what a band! I mean, man, they used to practice 10 hours a day.
When
was it?
bands
Some ridiculous amount of practice.
Sun Ra, they're okay, aren't they? Sun Ra and people like that, they're kind of coherent, but you got some that are a bit too fucking way out, man. I think you're not even musicians. You're just meeting up and making random noises, and it's not even good at all.
That's true.
Makes me feel sick.
I just got to expand a little bit. You mentioned Monk. You mentioned Oscar Peterson, so I got to give a shout out to some Canadian blues and jazzmen. Oscar Peterson, of course, is probably one of the most famous bluesy jazzmen out there. A highly accomplished, award-winning pianist, and he's a Canadian. So shout out to the late great Oscar Peterson, a great Canadian. There's a statue of him in Nova Scotia, in Halifax, Nova Scotia, his hometown. And I got to give another shout out to another fantastic Canadian bluesman who passed away about 10 years ago now or so, Mr. Jeff Healey.
Jeff Healey, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
One of the greatest ever play guitar ever. I would put him in the top 10 of all time of electric blues guitar players.
Yep.
And heavily steeped in the tradition, right down to the fact that he was blind as a bat. And he played on his lap.
Yeah, like a piano.
And you can find many videos of him performing live on YouTube. He performed on Saturday Night Live. He performed jams with Stevie Ray Vaughan and Eric Clapton. Everybody at one point wanted to play with Jeff Healey because he is and was absolutely amazing. And he was one of those guys that we were talking about earlier, that where you feel it, you feel the music. He felt the music. And also quite an accomplished jazz trumpet player in his own right, I might add. But
Didn't
His
know
bread
that.
and butter was really, he was an amazing blues guitar player here from Canada. And I actually had the opportunity to sneak in when I was 16, sneak into a bar to see him when he was
Cool.
performing in Calgary. My brother and I snuck in with a couple of friends, and they all looked much older than me. So we only got to see 3 songs. And by the time the waitress came to the table and we ordered a pitcher of beer, she ID'd everybody because of me, and we got kicked out. But I managed to see him play 3 songs live at a pretty small venue in Calgary in the 80s, right when he was at the height of his powers. He had just released that song, See the Light, which is an amazing song with an amazing solo. And he was just captivating. Those 3 songs will stay with me forever. Just absolutely incredible Canadian blues artists. So yeah, shout out to Oscar Peterson and Jeff Healy.
Yeah, talking of being ID'd, we did a gig. We're doing a gig in Edinburgh one time, and our bass player was only 17 at the time, and he got ID'd. They won't let it. The bouncers won't let him in. I said, "You better let him in. He's going on stage.
He's in the band. Yeah, jeez.
He's going on stage." She didn't tell me, we can't bring him in. I said, "Right, well, he's my ward then. He'll have to be with me, won't he?" Is he going to drink? I said, "Absolutely not. You've got to be joking." Got slaughtered.
Come on, you got to have a little whiskey or some beer with the blues. They go hand in hand. I
mean, not when you're driving a van.
Blues really became sort of solidified because it was played in juke joints and house rent parties where people would go to drink and let off some steam and have a good time, and they wanted to be entertained by some good rock and music, and blues was their preference at that time. So, you know, whether it was in the city in some juke joint, or it was in the country in some backwoods shanty, or still, you know, where they were brewing their own home brew, moonshine or whatever, and you'd have some party out in the woods. Either way, you know, booze and blues went hand in hand. They sang about it. They a lot of times when they went to record a song, they would have a quick shot of whiskey just to calm their nerves a little bit before they, you know, they hit the record button, sort of thing.
Yeah, well, we have a band around here called, hang on a minute, the Convulsions, if you Google it. And they often go over to play in Chicago, and they have to have a sort of a guide with them, because the gigs they play are in some deep Chicago places, and there's if they don't go with a guard or a guide, I should say, they can hit some trouble because they're white. It's interesting how they play, but you want to hear the harp player. He's a bit tasty. He's Ben Ruth, if you're googling.
Ben Ruth, okay, yeah.
Ben Ruth. Let's have a look. Here we are, Ben Ruth, harp solo. I'll just hang on a minute. I'll copy the link address and put it in the thing.
Sure.
That's almost doxing myself a little bit here, but anyway. This guy. This guy can't play.
You almost can't blame a lot of the, you know, the African American and the Black community to this day, even wanting to protect, you know, the heritage that's almost become the soundtrack to their culture is the blues, really, especially considering the younger generations since, you know, the late 50s, early 60s of Black Americans have sort of shunned blues because, that's my daddy or my granddaddy's poor ass slave music. I don't want to listen to that depressing stuff. So the Black kids started listening to rock and roll, and then soul, and then funk and R&B and that sort of thing, right? So then white kids come along and they want to, much like us and what we're talking about here today, you want to discover where rock and roll came from. You find the blues, and it speaks to you, so you want to play it. And I could sort of understand how it's always in danger of becoming a lost musical art form, and you could sort of see how Black Americans want to sort of protect it so that it's not quote unquote appropriated, sort of thing, right? So
there's an interesting. We're trying to appreciate it and enjoy it. I agree, though.
There's an interesting sort of thing going on there with the blues, because It was, like I said, it was basically known as the voice of the African American from the 20s right through to the 50s. But then they started to shun that form of music themselves. And then white kids picked it up and started carrying it forward and sort of representing it in a fresh new package.
Which it needed at that time.
Yeah, I think so. And then now you've got a new generation of African Americans that are rediscovering the roots of the music that they listen to now and where it came from. So they're listening to R&B and hip hop and soul and funk and saying, oh, where is this coming from? And then they're going back now and they're discovering the Muddy Waters and the James Brown and the Ray Charles, and going further back and then discovering the Howlin' Wolf and the Ike Turner and the B.B. Kings and that sort of thing.
See, in my perspective as an outsider, as you know, someone from totally non-Anglo background, looking at that stuff, it's like, okay, so you people discarded your music in the 60s, and then the white man came along and played guitar better and updated the blues. And now, after all that, the funk and the soul and all the music that you just mentioned, they want to now go back and say, oh, white people can't touch us anymore, it's ours. Sorry, you don't get to do that.
Yeah, it's a global type of music, like I said, because the original idea or the original birth of the blues was that it was a folk music, and like I said, everybody was singing and playing this early style of music.
And as you said, whiskey. If it wasn't for people like in the 60s, like Eric Clapton, Rolling Stones, John Mayall, nobody would know who people like Robert Johnson even was at that stage.
Right. Well, there's a famous quote, and I'm going to paraphrase it here because I can't remember it word for word, but when the Rolling Stones come to America to record at Chess after they've already had a couple of successful albums and they're pretty globally well known, they were pretty famous already at this point. They come to Chicago to record at Chess, and they're getting off the plane at the airport, and a couple of news reporters are asking them, oh, hey, welcome to America, and what are you going to do, and what are you going to see, and what's the first thing you're going to do when you come here, sort of thing. And I think it was Mick Jagger that said, well, we're going to go and see Muddy Waters. Yeah. And the news reporter said, where's that? Mick Jagger got angry at him and said, it's not a place, it's a person. His name is Muddy Waters. He's a blues singer. You don't even know your own musical history.
That's so sad. Yeah, I could understand why they'd get angry. Well, not angry, just frustrated, possibly, with feeling that their music's been appropriate. I could understand that. I mean, look at all the argy-bargy that went on with who invented punk. I mean, that was just in the late 70s. Oh, well, it was Toy Dolls, it was this band, it was that band, whatever. Not the Toy Dolls, oh, baby, I love it. What do you call that band? DD. What do you call that band?
I don't know.
Baby, I love you. Come on, baby. Big punk bebop. Blitzkrieg bop they did. Hey, oh, let's go. What do you call them?
The Ramones.
The Ramones, yeah. Well, who invented punk? The Ramones, or is it the Toy Dolls, or whatever they called, or the Plastic Dolls? What was it called, that band? Either way, who invented
New York Dolls.
New York Dolls.
New York Dolls. Sorry, not the Toy Dolls. That's such a completely different band.
New York Dolls was like 1974, and the Ramones were unique. Well,
the thing is that people often forget that much like today, back then there was sort of a grapevine or an underground that would relay all of this information or all of these different types of music. Even in the 20s and 30s, like I said, these musicians were getting together and trading licks and teaching each other songs, and artists were buying each other's records or supporting each other when they would tour around and go to different juke joints. And these are like not formally organized tours or anything. I'm talking about Robert Johnson and Honey Boy Edwards would hop on a train in a boxcar in the middle of the night, and they would travel from Rolling Forks, Mississippi to, I don't know, Helena, Arkansas. And they'd get in late at night, and they would, maybe sleep in a hotel or rent a room somewhere. And then Friday night, they would walk around town and they would play on street corners and get the word out that they were going to be playing that night at their local juke joint. And they would play that night and make a bunch of money and get some food and some drink, maybe rent a room that night again. And the next day, hop on a train, head to the next town. And that's how they did it. And then that's why you end up with regional styles in the early days of the blues influencing each other. And that's why you also had white bluesmen and black bluesmen performing the same song, or in many cases performing together as duets or as ensemble, because they didn't care. To them, it was just about the music, and they were all musicians, and they, it was like, oh, you want to play blues? Sure. Or what songs do you know? Oh, let's play, Moon Going Down. All right. And they would, if they all knew it, they would just break into it and start playing it. And there was no differentiation back then between, if you were from Arkansas or Mississippi, or if you were black or you were white. I mean, Charlie Patton, one of the founding fathers of the blues, had some white blood in him, some African-American blood in him, some Spanish blood in him, some Indian blood, American Indian blood in him.
I think it's great when you get the B.B. King and Eric Clapton together, that kind of scenario. That's really,
yes,
I've seen a few of them sort of things.
Yeah, absolutely. Or Stevie Ray Vaughan and Buddy Guy, who were really, really good friends.
That was good.
These, and it's always been a tradition in the blues. It's the outside forces that like maybe record companies and that sort of thing, that are trying to drive the idea that blues are for blacks and country is for whites. Because if you go far enough back, like I said, they were all playing the same music and they were all playing it together.
Yeah, that's a money making.
You might get where I'm coming from here, though, right? But I find that people like Stevie Ray Vaughan are so talented. I find it a bit disturbing, and I prefer people who are a bit more sloppy.
Well, I know what
you mean. Especially when it comes to the blues, right? Because if you go back to the earlier forms of the blues, it was a little bit more of a simple way of playing. The subject matter, the chord structure, everything was just very, I guess, for lack of a better term, bare bones, right?
Yeah.
And it was because it was based, the blues itself, when you go back far enough, were just based on field hollers and work songs put to Irish jigs and, Scottish ballads and fishing shanty type songs.
Yeah.
And this was mashed together, and over decades and decades and decades, it eventually became known what we now call the blues. So it sort of had to be broken down into a simple form like that.
That was with all music. I mean, look at metal now.
They were like C6 Steve, a lot of them. They just only had a couple of strings and they just made the best of what they had.
Sure. Well, the diddly bow, a lot of times the diddly bow was one string.
Yeah, I mean, at least C6 Steve's got 3 strings. He's lucky, man. He's a rich man.
Yeah, well, he was a proper hobo, wasn't he? He travelled under the bottom of trains.
Or you get somebody like Big Joe Williams that played 9.
That's why C6 Steve has been so well received, because he is the most genuine thing we have actually got to these early bluesmeisters. He's the real thing. He's lived the life of pain, and he is singing the blues for real from his heart and his soul. So what he's actually doing is he's just manifesting his actual being into the sound, which is what the blues is.
And everybody loves it, which is cool.
It's a universal, global type of music that sprung out of the muddy delta of the Mississippi South in the late 1890s, and it's now spread all over the world, and Holland and Africa. And in fact, I've got a DVD where there's a pretty well accomplished bluesman, and he goes back to Mali, Africa, and he just sits under a tree in the shade and starts playing his guitar, and he just starts playing a basic 12-bar blues. I think he's playing Muddy's Catfish Blues. And an African citizen there in Mali, just a guy walking by who happened to have an African guitar, I think called a Goja or something like that, hears him playing, sits down next to him, and just joins in note for note And when the American guy, I'm just drawing a blank at the moment on his name, but anyways, he sings a couple of verses in English, and then he stops, and then the African guy picks up and starts singing verses in his native language, whatever they speak in Mali, I'm not sure. And it's a 12-bar blues. It matches, and they're bending at the same time and everything. It's absolutely incredible.
Cool. Right, well, I'm gonna have to scarp, I'm afraid, Jen.
Yeah, it's getting close to midnight there for you.
Yeah,
both of you fellas, isn't it?
I'm up at about 6:15 tomorrow.
Yeah,
All right.
I'll have to.
it's quarter to 12.
Yeah, it's quarter to 12. In.
Well, this was a great inaugural run of a live stream here at Harp and Guitar, People in Music. I think this was fantastic.
Yeah,
Yep.
Maybe before you guys, MH and Monk jump out, maybe you could just leave us with some sort of final thoughts on sort of your love for the blues.
Well, it's hard to describe the sheer pleasure I've had out of it. It really is. I mean, I wake up in the morning, I can have a quick go at the guitar if I feel like it or not. And it's always there. It's been there for 38 years. Just to pick up the guitar and go, you know. It's great. And because of the sheer story that goes behind that, all the hours and hours and hours and hours and hours and hours of polishing and practicing. It's been immensely satisfying, and it continues to pay. You know what I mean? It's just a great hobby to follow it through. And listening to you talking about the history of it, you feel like you're part of something, you know?
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I agree 100%.
Yep.
Well, thanks, Monk. I appreciate
Well,
that.
my favorite part of the blues is the way that it encompasses a wide spectrum. Like it goes, like we said, right from the Mississippi Delta, simplistic grassroots thing, all the way up to the 60s and so on, even to the modern day rock and roll. So the blues is basically the backbone of all groovy music. So most music that I've ever found groovy is blues based for real. So respect to all those old masters of the past. That is your legacy, which has just blown up so incredible. If they would have been aware of their success, amazing. So yeah, they're my closing words. Thanks for having me, everybody.
Beautiful.
Cool.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Cool.
MH.
Thanks,
Thank
guys.
you very much. Yeah. Riff, anything you want to add? I'm kind of ready to shut it down here pretty quick myself.
Yeah.
Just so I can get a bite to eat. And I know you want to get some stuff done on your final day off there.
Yeah.
It's coming up on 9 a.m. there for you, isn't it?
Yep. Yeah, no, almost. Yeah, I think with when people go through any kind of difficulties in life and you feel that sort of frustration and angst and any kind of suffering response, the blues is going to speak to you naturally. And, regardless of where you come from, what color skin you have, that's an experience that we as human beings share. And that kind of musical expression, I think, is probably one of the most healthiest way of expressing those feelings, and that's where the blues, help and live on.
Yes, I couldn't have said it better myself. It soothes the soul. I just realized that I forgot to tell a quick story of how I came to the blues, so I'll make it short. Make it short but sweet, and then I'll sign off here. But basically, kind of like Riff, it came at me from two different angles sort of simultaneously. I remember when I was about 12 or 13, I was delivering newspapers and mowing lawns to earn my own money, and I started buying my own records. And I was kind of influenced by what my parents were listening to. My parents were pretty cool because they were younger when they had me. So my parents were listening to things like, of course, Elvis and you know, James Brown and Stevie Wonder and Ray Charles, but you know, they were also listening to Led Zeppelin and you know, the music of the '70s when I was a kid growing up, right? Steve Miller Band and stuff like that. So I remember when I first saved up enough to buy my own record, I bought Led Zeppelin, and I remember seeing a song credited to W. Dixon and thinking, "Who's this W. Dixon?" And finding out it was Willie Dixon, and finding out that Willie Dixon wrote a lot of songs for Muddy Waters and Howlin' Wolf. So then I started exploring Muddy, and I had sort of been familiar also. The other way I came to it, again, through my parents, was I was familiar through Howlin' Wolf, actually. My dad really liked Howlin' Wolf, and he used to play a couple of Howlin' Wolf songs over and over again. And I remember as a kid hearing Howlin' Wolf. He does this sort of a famous, what he calls a moan, where he goes, kind of like that. And to me as a kid, it was a scary sound. It was a haunting sound, and it used to make the hair on the back of my neck kind of stand up. And I can remember as a kid saying, "Daddy, don't play that record. It's got that ghost wolf." To me, Howlin' Wolf's moan sounded like a wolf, or the ghost of a wolf howling, right? And I remember being scared of it, but fascinated by it at the same time. And it frightened me, but I liked it. Kind of like when you watch a scary movie, it scares you, but you enjoy it at the same time. It's kind of like that. So I sort of came into the blues through Led Zeppelin and blues rock, much like Riff mentioned much earlier in the chat with Tony Joe White and stuff like that. But then also through just through Howlin' Wolf. To me, Howlin' Wolf was a gateway as well. And I'll always remember that chilling sound of the wolf and the way he would moan or howl like that. And his harmonica playing was very chilling and haunting as well. So that's sort of how I came into it. And I just became fascinated with it. And through my teens, I explored it more and more. And it's always been a big part of my life. And I firmly believe that it's the music of the people. And it's for everyone to share and enjoy and spread around the world, much like BB did in his life, being the ambassador of the blues. So God rest your soul, rest in peace, Mr. BB King, who passed away not long ago. And in the immortal words of Mr. Muddy Waters, who on his deathbed spoke to Buddy Guy, his close personal friend. Buddy Guy went to visit Muddy as Muddy was dying. And Muddy looked at Buddy Guy and said, "You have to keep these blues alive." And I think that that's an important thing that all of us around the world who find passion in this beautiful musical art form should try to do, is to keep this music alive and share it with everyone. So I want to thank everybody today. I want to thank MH and Riff for coming in and joining Monk and myself for our maiden voyage here on Harp and Guitar, People in Music, for our first live stream and Blues Chat. And I think it was great. I had a great time. Learned a lot about you fellas. Yeah, very good.
Okay. Good night, gents.
All right.
Thanks,
well,
guys.
thank you very much. Thanks again,
brilliant.
fellas.
Thank
And
you,
everyone,
Whiskey.
please don't forget to like and share the video. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to Monk and myself here at Harp and Guitar, People in Music. And I think we're going to try to do this again a little more often if we can.
Yep, I think it's.
That'd be great.
Yeah.
I think it's got a bright future. I have got one closing message which I should have said earlier, actually, which is that
Please,
the blues is something for everybody. It's something you can learn simply, easily. You can get involved. You can have some fun. And so don't be scared. Pick up the guitar. Don't be shy. Everyone can have a go. Get started. Get going. Get moving. And you keep at it. Just keep at it. None of these skills will come to anybody by magic. You got to earn it.
That's right. You know, we often say
in your own time.
We often say that the blues just kind of popped up out of the mud of the Mississippi Delta, and these guys of legends like Robert Johnson and Charlie Patton and Son House that we've been speaking about here today, it almost seems like they just popped up out of nowhere and were instantly able to play this magnificent form of music from birth. But these guys stuck to it and worked at it and made it their life's work, and they never gave up. And as a result, we're all we're all recipients of this wonderful gift as a result of these
We're
beats.
richer
That's
for
right.
it.
We're all the richer for it. So yes, absolutely, MH. It's something for everyone to share, and that's how the music started. Blues started with one man or one woman out in a cotton field or out on a pea farm somewhere, or in a cornfield shucking corn or picking cotton, and just humming and singing to themselves to make their burden a little easier on themselves. Just a little bit of a
And I think a lot of that was designed to haunt their masters as well, really.
It was to give them a sense of peace in their daily grind. And
Yeah.
every masterful bluesman that we've been talking about today at some point started off just noodling on their guitar or blowing into their harmonica on their back porch after a long, hard day's work. So find some solace and joy in the pastimes of the great men that came before us.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
So
cool.
thanks everyone. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, guys. Till next time.
Cheers, boys.
All right, take care, everyone.
On it, I mean.
Have a good
Good
one.
night.
Yeah, man.